Daniel Foster stood alone in the empty observation room of the Galactic Council station. His dark suit was creased and clean, but his face showed the marks of 300 years of human patience wearing thin. He looked at the star charts on the wall, each one showing the locations of human colonies spread across the outer rim of the galaxy. 5,000 people were dead on 7. That was the number that would not leave his mind. 5,000 colonists, including 300 children, had been murdered by the Marauders. The Marauders were a group of criminals and exiles that nobody wanted to claim as their own. They took orders from whoever paid them the most credits. This time, they had been paid to attack the human colony, and they had done their job without mercy. Daniel had brought the case to the council 6 days ago. He had walked into the great chamber where all the major species sent their representatives. He had files, evidence, and video recordings of the attack. He had shown them the burned buildings and the empty nurseries. He had shown them families torn apart by violence. The council had listened. The delegates had made their speeches about regret and sorrow. The leaders had promised an investigation. The syndicate merchants had offered compensation in the form of trade credits. They had offered Daniel everything except what he actually wanted. They would not punish the Marauders. They would not send their own military forces to stop the attacks. They would not acknowledge that human lives mattered as much as their own. This was the breaking moment. Daniel knew it in his bones. He turned away from the star charts and walked to his office. It was a small space on the edge of the station, far from the main chambers where the important decisions were made. His desk held communication equipment that connected Earth to this distant outpost in space. He sat down slowly and began to type. The declaration took him 2 hours to write. Each word had to be precise. Each sentence had to carry weight. He could not make mistakes now because everything he was about to do would change the future of humanity forever. We declare war on any faction that threatens humanity's existence and the Council's indifference toward our suffering, he wrote. We declare war on the Marauders and any organization that employs them. We declare war on the Council's failure to protect their member species equally. Effective immediately, Earth withdraws from all non-combat agreements and will defend its people by any means necessary. The words were simple and direct. No flowery language, no diplomatic softness, just the truth spoken plainly. Daniel sent the message to every human installation in space. He sent it to the military command on Earth. He sent it to every colony world and space station where humans lived and worked. The message was brief and clear: prepare for war. Then he did something else. He sent a message directly to the council chamber. It was a formal notification that humanity was requesting an emergency session. The notification said he would deliver an important statement that affected all member species. 3 hours later, the chamber was full. They sent their highest representative. They brought their military commander. The syndicate had 5 different ambassadors present. They all wanted to know what had caused this emergency meeting. They had probably assumed Daniel would demand more compensation or ask for a larger investigation team. Daniel walked to the center of the chamber. He was not a tall man by human standards, but he stood straight. His voice was steady and calm as he spoke. I am here to inform the Council that humanity is withdrawing from all non-combat agreements effective immediately, he said. Earth is declaring war on the Marauders and any faction that employs them. We are also declaring that this Council is no longer authorized to make decisions about human safety and human survival. From this moment forward, humanity will defend itself using whatever means we deem necessary. The chamber went silent. It was a silence that seemed to last forever. The representative's crystalline form flickered with confusion. The commander's scales stood up along his spine. The syndicate ambassadors looked at each other as if they could not believe what they had just heard. Humanity was not supposed to do this. Humanity was the peaceful species. Humans were the ones who listened and accepted the Council's decisions. Then Daniel pulled up the display screens. Across the galaxy, military satellites were lighting up in real time. Earth's Space Force was mobilizing. Ships were launching from bases on 3 different planets. Human military installations that had been hidden in remote locations suddenly activated their communication systems. The humans had been preparing for this moment for a long time. My people will no longer sit in observation seats while you ignore our suffering, Daniel continued. My people will no longer accept your condolences and your credits as payment for our dead. You have made a mistake in underestimating humanity. You have made a mistake in thinking that we would accept second place forever. Those mistakes will cost you." The commander stood up. His voice was angry and confused. "You are throwing away centuries of peace," he said. "You are choosing war with powers that can destroy you." Daniel looked directly at the commander. His expression did not change. "We are choosing to survive," Daniel said. "We are choosing to protect our children. We are choosing to fight for what matters. You have taught us that the Council will not protect us. You have shown us that your words mean nothing. Now you will learn what humans are truly capable of." Security moved toward Daniel, but he had already reached the exit. He did not run. He walked calmly out of the chamber and toward the docking bay. His personal ship was waiting. He had packed his belongings before the meeting. He had known he would not be coming back. As his ship undocked from the station, Daniel watched Earth in the distance. He thought about the 5,000 people on Seven. He thought about all the humans across the galaxy who had suffered under the Council's indifference. He thought about the generations of humans who had hoped the galaxy would change and welcome them as equals. The waiting was over. The time for diplomacy was finished. Humanity had finally decided to show the galaxy what it had really become, and nothing would ever be the same again. Daniel sent one more message to every human commander in space. "Today we remind them why fight harder than any other species. Today we show them that we should never have been ignored. Today we take our place." The human fleet was already moving toward their first target. The age of human restraint had ended. Admiral Price stood in the command center of the flagship Defender. Around her, tactical officers worked at their stations, tracking the movement of every human ship in space. Had been preparing for this war for 20 years, even though most people in power had dismissed the idea as impossible. She had studied every Council military force. She had analyzed their strengths and weaknesses. She had learned their tactics from the records of past conflicts. She knew they were stronger than humanity in raw firepower, but believed something that most other species had forgotten. Strength was not everything. Strategy was sometimes worth more than weapons. Was 45 years old, but her mind was sharp and her decisions were quick. She had risen through the military ranks on Earth not because she was liked by people in power, but because she was always right. Her tactical plans won battles against superior forces. Her strategies saved lives. Now, for the first time, she would be using those skills in a real war, not a training exercise. Her first target was the pirate station called Havoc Point. This station had become the headquarters for the marauders who had attacked Seven, had satellite images that showed the station's exact location and defenses. She had studied how the marauders organized their forces. She knew exactly how many of them were present and what weapons they carried. The human fleet approached the station carefully, did not want to give the marauders any warning. She had 12 strike ships and 200 fighter craft. The marauders had many more fighters, but ships were faster and more maneuverable than anything in the Council's arsenal. The humans had evolved on a harsh world where everything tried to kill them. This meant humans could handle forces and pressures that would destroy other species. Pilots pushed their fighters to speeds that should have been impossible. Their acceleration was so fast that aliens who flew these same ships had died from the stress on their bodies. But humans had different physiology. Their hearts pumped faster. Their bones were denser. Their muscles and organs were built to survive punishment. The first attack was devastating. His fleet came out of jump space and immediately launched missiles at the station's defense platforms. The missiles were old technology, but they were reliable. 12 defense platforms exploded in the first 5 seconds of the attack. The marauders did not have time to mount a proper defense. Spoke into the communications system. Her voice was clear and steady. "All strike teams, prepare for landing. This is what they get for attacking our people. This is what they get for killing our children." Drop pods fell toward the station like meteors. These pods could survive impacts that would tear most ships apart. Inside each pod were human soldiers trained to fight in the worst conditions imaginable. They came from every continent on Earth. They had been picked for their strength and their determination. They had also been picked because they understood something very important. They were fighting for something that mattered. The human soldiers hit the station and immediately moved toward their objectives. They were faster than the marauders expected. They were tougher than the marauders could match. They seemed to come from nowhere and hit from every direction. The marauders tried to organize a defense, but they were used to fighting weak civilians, not trained military soldiers. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, the marauders had lost over 2,000 fighters. The human losses were 43 soldiers. knew those 43 would matter to their families, to their friends, to everyone who knew them. But the math was clear. Humanity had won a massive victory. Transmitted orders to every human commander in the galaxy. The message was not about celebration, it was about purpose. "This is Admiral Price," she said. "We have struck the first blow. The marauders who killed our people on Seven will answer for what they did, but this is only the beginning. Every human colony will now be protected. Every human world will have a guardian force. We are no longer asking for permission to survive. We are taking it." The orders spread across human space like lightning. Military ships that had been hidden in remote locations came out of hiding. Fortifications that had been built in secret were activated. Human colonies that had been afraid of attack now had defenders, had planned for this moment for so long that everything moved like clockwork. She contacted the Council directly on an open channel. "This is Admiral Price of the human fleet," she said. "We have eliminated the marauders responsible for the attack on Seven. We are prepared to eliminate anyone else who threatens human lives. Any faction that works against us will face the same response. We are not interested in negotiation. We are interested in survival. Remember that the next time you underestimate humanity." Ended the transmission before anyone could respond. She already knew what they would say. They would demand explanations. They would order her to stand down. They would threaten her with Council punishment. But also knew that the Council had no power over humanity anymore. Humanity was writing its own rules now. She turned to her second in command, a young officer named Anderson, had grown up on a colony world. He had seen his home threatened by pirates and outlaws because the Council would not send help. He understood exactly why this war had to happen. "What are our next objectives?" asked. Pulled up the star charts. She marked 5 different locations on the map. These were places where human colonies had been attacked or threatened. These were places where the Council's protection had failed. These were places where humans now needed to show that they could take care of themselves. "We strike here, here, and here," said, pointing to the locations. "We protect our people and we show the galaxy that we cannot be ignored. The Council thinks we are weak because we have been peaceful. They are about to learn that peace comes from strength, not weakness." His jaw was set with determination. Her hands were steady on the controls. She had trained for this. She had believed in this even when nobody else did. "Send the orders to all strike groups. We move in 12 hours. No delays, no hesitation. Every human soldier in this fleet knows what we are fighting for. We are fighting for survival. We are fighting for respect. We are fighting for the future of our species, and we will not lose." As her officers transmitted the orders, looked at the images of Seven on her screen, she thought about the 5,000 people who had died. She thought about the 300 children who would never grow up. She thought about their families and their dreams that had been cut short. "For them," she whispered to herself, "we do this for them." And the human war machine continued to move forward, unstoppable and focused on a single goal, making sure that humanity would never be ignored again. Commander Hayes sat in a room with representatives from a dozen different species. Some of them had never met a human before. Some had heard stories about humans and believed them to be peaceful traitors and weak diplomats. Now they were looking at with hope because hope was something they had almost stopped believing in. The room was on a neutral space station far from the control of any major council power. Had chosen this location carefully. He needed to meet with leaders from the smaller species without drawing attention from the great powers. These were the species that the council had forgotten or pushed aside. These were the species that had suffered under the same indifference that had hurt humanity. Was a tall man with sharp eyes and a direct way of speaking. He had been a diplomat like Daniel Foster, but he had never been satisfied with the observation seats and the ignored proposals. He had spent his life studying the smaller species, learning their languages, understanding their histories. He had made friends among them while other humans barely noticed their existence. The representative was named. She was old by her species' standards. Her skin had turned pale with age and her movements were slow, but her eyes were bright and intelligent. There had once been a great civilization. They had built cities on 100 worlds. They had created art and music that was beautiful beyond description. Now they lived on 3 small colonies in the outer territories, and most of the galaxy had forgotten they existed. "The humans are declaring war," said simply. He did not hide the truth or soften the message. "They are declaring war because the Council would not protect them. Now I am here to make you an offer. Join us. Join humanity and we will protect you. We will defend your worlds. We will listen to your voices. We will treat you as equals, not as servants. Leaned forward, her voice was barely a whisper. Why would you do this? She asked. Why would humans risk their strength to defend species that the Council has abandoned? Looked directly into Sai's. Because they are people who matter, he said. Because you have dignity that deserves respect. Because the Council should never have forgotten you, and I will not let that happen anymore. Humanity will rise. We will become a power that the galaxy cannot ignore, and we will use that power to lift up the species that have been pushed down. The other representatives watched this exchange carefully. They had been lied to before by politicians and merchants. They had heard promises that were never kept. They had learned not to trust anyone from the major powers, but was different. He had risked everything to be here. He had left behind a secure position in human command to come and speak to them personally. That meant something. Over the next hours, made similar offers to the other species. A small group called the Merchant Guild had been locked out of profitable trade routes by the syndicate powers. They were going broke while the syndicate grew rich. Promised them fair trade partnerships where humans would buy their goods at honest prices. A colony of they had been invaded by raiders 3 times, and the Council had done nothing. Promised military protection and weapons to help them defend themselves. The species had lost their political voice in the council chambers. They were ignored whenever they tried to speak. Promised that under human partnership, their voices would be heard and their votes would count. By the end of the meeting, had commitments from every species present. They would join humanity in this war. They would not fight on the front lines unless they chose to, but they would provide support. They would provide information. They would provide resources. More importantly, they would stand with humanity against the Council. Came to as the meeting was ending. She moved slowly, but her hand was steady as she placed it on shoulder. If you break your promise, I will spend the last years of my life making sure the galaxy knows, said. But if you keep it, then perhaps they will have a future again. You have my word, replied. And the word of humanity is worth something now. We are building something different. We are building a future where all species matter equally. Left the station with agreements from 12 different species. He immediately transmitted reports back to Admiral Price. The military had expected to fight this war alone. Now they would have allies. The merchant guilds would provide supplies. The scouts would provide intelligence. The fighters would help defend human colonies. The pieces were falling into place. Responded with a message that was brief but powerful. Excellent work. Now they will fight with us knowing that we fight for them as well as ourselves. That will make us stronger than any council fleet. Then did something that surprised many people in the military command structure. He issued a declaration to all allied species that would be shared across the galaxy. The declaration outlined humanity's principles for this new alliance. Humanity declares that all species deserve equal treatment, the declaration read. Humanity declares that survival is the right of all sentient beings, not just the powerful. Humanity declares that the age of the Council's indifference is ending. From this moment forward, any attack on our allies is an attack on humanity. Any threat to their survival is a threat to ours. We will stand together, and together we are stronger than any force in the galaxy. The declaration was sent to every frequency, every communication system, and every news network in known space. The message spread faster than light can travel through subspace communications. The Council species heard it and understood that this was serious. The smaller species heard it and felt something they had not felt in generations: hope. But the most important effect was on the human soldiers themselves. They heard words, and they understood that they were not just fighting for Earth. They were fighting for something larger. They were fighting to change the galaxy itself. They were fighting to end the system that had treated weak species like they did not matter. That gave every human soldier in the galaxy a reason to fight that went beyond orders and duty. That gave them a reason that came from the heart. Admiral Price read's declaration in her command center. She looked at the list of allied species and smiled. Good, she said to no one in particular. Now the Council will understand that they made a mistake. They should never have ignored us. They should never have ignored anyone. The human military continued to prepare for the battles ahead. But now they knew they would not be alone. Now they knew they had allies who believed in their cause. Now they knew they were fighting for something that mattered to more than just themselves. The alliance was growing stronger every day. The Council Assembly met in secret to plan their response. They could no longer ignore humanity. They could no longer pretend that the threat would go away. The human military had attacked Havoc Point. The human fleet had destroyed council facilities in 5 different star systems. The human diplomatic efforts had unified a dozen smaller species into a coordinated alliance. The Chancellor spoke first. His crystalline form seemed to glow with anger. "We must crush humanity before this rebellion grows any larger," he said. "We must show all species what happens when someone defies the Council. We must mobilize our entire military force and destroy the human threat." The commander agreed. The syndicate merchants were afraid. They had invested too much in the Council system to allow it to fall. They voted unanimously to assemble the greatest military force the galaxy had seen in 300 years. They brought their crystalline destroyers. These ships were beautiful and deadly. They could fire energy weapons that could cut through most defensive shields. They had always been proud of their military strength. They sent their bioengineered warships. These vessels were grown from living creatures rather than built from metal. They could repair themselves. They could adapt to new threats. They had created them to be the perfect weapons. The syndicate contributed over 1,000 merchant vessels that had been converted to military use. They did not have the advanced weapons of the or the adaptability of the, but they had numbers. They had coordination. They had the advantage of resources. The combined fleet numbered over 3,000 ships. It was massive beyond anything the humans could possibly match. The council leaders felt confident again. Confidence turned to certainty. Certainty became arrogance. Admiral Price received the warning from her scouts. The council fleet was assembling. The council fleet was coming, studied the reports and calculated the numbers. She knew she was outnumbered 3-1. She knew that on paper she should lose this battle. But did not fight battles on paper. She fought them in 3 dimensions using strategy that her enemies had never considered. She sent a message to every human ship in the galaxy. They are coming. They are coming with overwhelming force. They are coming because they believe they cannot lose, but we have something they do not have. We have learned how to survive on a world where everything tries to kill us. We have learned how to adapt to impossible situations. We have learned that courage means continuing to fight even when the odds are against us. Today, we show them what humans are really made of. Divided her fleet into multiple groups. Each group had a different mission. Some groups would engage the council fleet directly. Other groups would attack supply lines. Some groups would defend the allied species' settlements. Was not trying to win a single battle. She was trying to win a war. The first battle took place across 3 star systems simultaneously. The council fleet did not expect this. They were used to battles where all the forces met in one location and the strongest side won. But humans thought differently. Humans understood that you could win by being smart when you could not win by being strong. Young fighter pilot Sarah sat in the cockpit of her interceptor. Her hands were steady on the controls even though her heart was racing. She had trained for this her entire life. Now it was real. Now there were real people trying to kill her. Sarah's fighter was smaller and lighter than the council ships. She could move faster. She could turn. She could survive at speeds that would tear apart most alien fighters. The council pilots had never flown like this. They did not know how to respond. Sarah locked her weapons onto a council destroyer. The destroyer tried to track her movement, but she was already gone. She came around and fired. The destroyer's shields flared under the impact. Sarah came around again and fired again. The shields failed. The destroyer exploded. Sarah had won her first real combat. She had killed a council ship with superior weapons and superior technology. She had won because humans could move in ways that other species had never learned. All across the 3 battle zones, the same story was repeating. Human fighters were outmaneuvering council ships. Human tactics were breaking council formations. Human determination was overcoming council confidence. But the battle was not going completely in humanity's favor. The council fleet was still larger. The council weapons were still powerful. Human ships were being destroyed. Human soldiers were dying. Admiral Price made a decision that would determine the outcome of the battle. She sent a message to all her allied species. Attack the council supply lines, cut off their resources, force them to choose between advancing and surviving. The scouts attacked from directions the council had not considered. The merchant guild fighters harassed the supply ships. The warriors struck at the council's defensive positions. The attack was coordinated and devastating. The council fleet suddenly realized they were not fighting just humanity. They were fighting an alliance of multiple species. The realization spread through the Council forces like a virus. They began to retreat. The followed. The syndicate scattered their merchant vessels, trying to save themselves rather than continuing the battle. After 72 hours of continuous combat, the Council fleet was broken. Thousands of Council ships had been destroyed. Thousands of human ships had been destroyed as well. But the humans had won. The humans and their allies had defeated the greatest military force the Council could assemble. Transmitted her message across all frequencies. The Council fleet has been defeated. We do not seek conquest. We seek recognition. We seek the right to exist without interference. Any power that accepts this reality will find us to be reliable partners. Any power that refuses will discover what humanity is truly capable of. Sarah landed her fighter on the Defender. She climbed out of the cockpit with trembling legs. She had killed 5 Council ships. She had survived against impossible odds. She had proven that humans belonged among the great powers of the galaxy. Other pilots were landing around her. Some had died. Their empty cockpits would never fill again. But those who survived knew they had just changed history. They had just proven that humanity could not be defeated. Admiral Price stood in her command center and watched the battle reports come in. The losses had been heavy. Over 10,000 human soldiers had died. But the Council fleet had been shattered. The age of Council dominance was ending. Sent one final message to the Council. You had a chance to treat us with respect. You chose to ignore us instead. You have paid the price for that mistake. Now we will negotiate on equal terms. Now we will have a voice that matters. Now the galaxy will know that humans are a power to be reckoned with. The message spread across the galaxy like victory. The smaller species danced in the streets of their settlements. The human colonies celebrated the defense of their worlds. Humanity had fought the impossible battle and had won. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the final battle, the Council chambers were being rebuilt. The old observation seats where human diplomats had once sat in silence were completely removed. In their place, 4 new representative chairs were installed. These chairs were identical to the chairs of the major powers. The symbolism was clear. Humans were no longer second-class members of the Council. Humans were equals. Ambassador Daniel Foster walked into the chamber for the first time as a full representative. The Chancellor, who had ignored his proposals for decades, stood up as he entered. The commander acknowledged him with a nod that was filled with respect born of fear and recognition. The syndicate merchants, who had once tried to cheat humanity on every trade deal, now showed professional courtesy. Daniel sat in his new chair and looked around the chamber. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. He thought about the 5,000 people on 7 who had died to force the galaxy to change. He thought about the 10,000 human soldiers who had fallen in the war. He thought about all the individuals whose sacrifice had led to this moment. The first vote in the new council structure was about humanity's status and voice in galactic affairs. The vote was unanimous. Even the powers that had fought against humanity now recognized that they had no choice but to accept the new reality. Humanity had proven itself through force and determination. Humanity had earned its place. But Daniel understood something important. Military victory was not the same as winning the peace. The galaxy needed to learn a new way of working together. The species that had been pushed aside needed to understand that their voices would be heard. The humans needed to show that they would use their power to help, not to dominate. Commander Hayes was appointed as the coordinator of the Alliance of Free Species. This was a formal organization that combined the military and diplomatic efforts of humanity and the smaller species that had joined the war. The alliance would have its own fleet, its own government, and its own authority. It would no longer be controlled by the Council. Called a meeting of all the allied species leaders. They came to the meeting led by the old representative. She moved slowly with a walking stick, but her eyes were bright with hope. She had lived to see her people rise again. They have decided to rebuild our civilization, told the assembly. We will use the resources that humanity has provided. We will restore our cities and our culture. We will remember that when we were forgotten by the galaxy, humanity remembered us. The Merchant Guild representatives spoke about the fair trade agreements they had established with humanity. They were becoming wealthy again through honest dealing. They no longer had to cheat or trick others to survive. They had a partner in humanity that treated them as equals. The warriors spoke about the weapons and training they had received. They could now defend their colonies without help from the Council. They could stand up to any raider or pirate. They had become strong because humans had helped them become strong. Listened to all of them, and then made a promise that would shape the future of the galaxy. "We are building a new system," said. "A system where power is not used to dominate but to protect. A system where the smallest voice receives the same respect as the largest. A system where no species will be forgotten or pushed aside. Humanity fought this war not to conquer but to create this new system. Now we will spend our strength maintaining it." Meanwhile, on Earth, the military academies were being transformed. Officers were being trained not just in combat tactics, but in something more important: the philosophy of humanity's new role in the galaxy. Young recruits learned that strength without wisdom was just violence. They learned that power without compassion was cruelty. Young Officer Anderson was leading a new program to train soldiers from all the allied species alongside human soldiers. These soldiers would fight together. They would trust each other. They would understand that they were fighting for something that included all of them, not just one species. Fighter pilot Sarah was given command of her own ship. It was a smaller vessel, but it was all hers. She named it the Peacekeeper. Her mission was to patrol the territories where the smallest and most vulnerable species lived. She was no longer fighting in battles. She was preventing violence through the promise of protection. Sarah took her crew through the outer colonies and saw the changes that the war had created. In one system, they were rebuilding a city that had been destroyed by pirates years earlier. The pirates no longer came because Sarah's ship was there. The mere presence of a human guardian kept them safe. In another system, they were teaching young humans their fighting techniques. The humans were learning different ways to think about warfare. They were learning the human approach to courage and determination. Neither species was superior. Both were learning from each other. Sarah understood her purpose now. She was not there to conquer. She was not there to rule. She was there to make sure that no more species would be forgotten. She was there to prove that humanity's word meant something. She was there to show that power could be used for good. Daniel Foster sent a message to every human citizen in the galaxy. The message was simple but powerful. "We fought a war because we were desperate," Daniel wrote. "We fought because we had to protect ourselves and our children. We fought because no one else would listen to our voice. We won that war, but winning was not the goal. The goal was to create a galaxy where no species has to fight just to be heard. Now that we have power, we must use it wisely. We must remember what it felt like to be ignored. We must remember the price we paid for being treated like we did not matter. We must use our strength to lift up those who have been pushed down." The message spread across human space and into the territories of their allies. Humans understood that they had been given a responsibility. They had been given the power to change the galaxy. Now they had to prove that they could be trusted with that power. Years later, historians would look back on this time as the moment everything changed. They would speak about how humanity went from being ignored observers in the council chamber to being the guardians of the galactic order. But those who lived through it understood something simpler and more true. They understood that courage was not about being the strongest. Courage was about standing up for what was right even when you were weak. They understood that power was not about dominating others. Power was about protecting those who could not protect themselves. Humanity had learned this lesson the hard way. They had learned it through sacrifice and struggle. They had learned it by refusing to accept injustice. And now, with their newfound strength, they would make sure that the lesson spread throughout the galaxy. The war was over. The real work was just beginning.